Onorato Company coming at you live on the News Channel 13 Facebook, Twitter, YouTube pages. Chris Onorato and Ashley Miller. Hey, Ash.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Excellent. Ready to go on a Thursday. Baseball season is more than a month in. The NBA playoffs are down to the conference finals. Stanley Cup playoffs are catching up quickly. A wild game in the NHL on Wednesday night. I mean, I don't ever remember 15 goals scored in a single game. We can try to get into some of that here, but baseball is first and foremost on our minds. And our guest coming up on the show is NBA reporter and author Chris Herring, who has the smash book out right now called Blood in the Garden. And I am fired
I've started
up
it.
to talk some 1990s NBA with our guy, Chris Herring. Let's get the show started, though. On the other side, Aaron Judge's big bet on himself is paying off. So far, Yanks are red hot, historically hot. And the Mets are holding their collective breath over a potential pitching injury. Let's go.
This is Onorato Company, brought to you by Alpha House.
And a shout out to all of our local business partners here on Onorato Company. Ash, this is what I love about, I say live TV because it's used to what we're used to doing, live TV. But what I love about just doing a live stream show is you plan for something right at the beginning. Okay, we've got better things to do than talk about the Yankees or Mets, and that is to talk about the NBA playoffs.
Okay.
An incredible book that Chris Herring has out called Blood in the Garden. I see him getting set up, and what we have is a little bit of a green room view. I'll give him a second.
I've started the book. This may be my book for May because I'm a little behind. So my New Year's resolution was to read a book every month. Well, it's May 19th.
Yeah.
I started this 2 days ago, so I'm gonna have to play catch up quick. But really good so far. And you are like a big 90s NBA guy, so this will be fun for you.
I know. I romanticize it probably too often for people's liking, but that is when you had real playoff basketball. All right, let's bring our guest into the conversation here. Chris Herring, who covers the NBA, and he's got this smash of a book out called Blood in the Garden. Chris, it's Chris Onorato and Ashley Miller up in Albany, New York, man. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for joining the show, man. I'm a big fan of the book, big fan of 90s hoops. Still love basketball now, but I reminisce oftentimes about those Eastern Conference playoff battles. First of all, tell us a little bit about the genesis of the book. Like, how do you, 20 years later, more than that now, hey, you know what? This is the right time to talk about the 1990s New York Knicks.
Well, I wish I could take credit for all of that. A literary agent actually, kind of had the thought, was doing a really good job just as far as trying to get a sense of what the marketplace wanted. He would talk to book publishers and say, what sort of books are you looking forward to seeing? Do you think would sell well? And the one thing about book publishing, all the book publishers essentially are headquartered in New York City. So you have a lot of people that run the publishing houses that are Knicks fans, naturally. And, rightly looked at the situation and said, Knicks really have not been good in a long time. So people are maybe more nostalgic in New York than in other places. So at that point, he just had to find an author that could kind of put together a book like that. And he started asking around to some of the people that had written books for him before to get a sense of who would be the best person to do this. And a couple people mentioned me, and I covered the Knicks from 2012 to 2016. And so he asked me, I said no a couple times, basically. Then he came around to it. I'm someone that wanted to do a book at some point and, was probably just kind of waiting for the right subject or the right timing. It did not feel like the right timing to me. My dad had passed away a couple months before this, really unexpectedly. I was busier than I'd ever been. I just needed to exhale really badly. But thought about it a couple more times and really did think I could do a good job with it, and figured it could be a great first book to try to write. even though it wasn't my idea initially. And I got excited about it and spent 2.5 years kind of in the hole working on it. I guess not in the hole. I was still working full time.
Yeah.
But did work on it, and I'm proud of it at this point.
Chris, you said you covered the Knicks from 2012 to 2016. I know you've worked for various media outlets, but what is your NBA fandom? Are you a Knicks fan at heart? And what was this process like for you to work through? Because this takes you back to prior to you covering the team.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so to give you full context, I was 4 years old when Pat Riley got hired. I was not old enough to have known really anything about the team during those years. And I live in Chicago. I was raised in Chicago. So if anything, I was a Bulls fan. But again, I was too young, certainly at the beginning of this process, at the beginning of this stretch of time. And even, though I was a Bulls fan during my childhood, I wasn't enough of a fan or old enough to understand the dynamic between the Knicks and the Bulls. And I wasn't old enough to have really been a Bulls fan, really, until maybe Michael Jordan won maybe his fifth title. So maybe by the time that I am 8 years old at that point, I'm starting to get a better sense. But all I knew was that the Bulls were really, really good, and that we got parades every year here in the summer in Chicago. I didn't know what it meant context-wise. I didn't know. By that point, the Bulls and the Knicks weren't playing each other in the playoffs every year anymore. I don't think they've played each other in the playoffs since 1996. So I had no context around any of this. My fandom ended very quickly as a Bulls fan because, people talk about diehard fans. You couldn't call me one because the minute Michael Jordan wasn't playing for the Bulls anymore and they handed it over to high schoolers, I did not care. So I'm not a fan of any team, really. I think covering the league kind of, for me, it neutralizes that because you're watching how much guys put into it. You're wanting to distance yourself so much from people that, get angry and tweet at people when, someone has a bad game and they complain about their fantasy team, or someone breaks their leg and they're like, man, my fantasy team is going to take a hit. Like, you don't want to be associated with that because you're watching the sweat equity that they put into it. I remember writing about Tyson Chandler and how he would get sick often during the season, and he would get hurt, and people would say he should quarantine from his family, if he's going to get sick like this. And some of them would be serious. They're like, he makes $15 million a year. And I know most people are not like that, but I just wanted to always have a distance between me and people. Like, you're covering the team. You don't want to do that as a fan, that it warps your perception of things. But anyway, so that was my reality, is that I was a fan of the Bulls as a small child, but not, I haven't been a fan in a long, long time. So I was writing this from a pretty straight down the middle standpoint and kind of as a fly on the wall, the best I could. I talked to more than 200 people for this book.
Our viewers probably ask better questions than Ash and I do. So Joel's watching on YouTube, Chris. He wants to know, did Ewing get too much blame for the team's failure to win a championship? And was Starks unfairly judged for that Game 7 in Houston?
It's funny because within that question, I actually think it's a little bit, well, the first part is like reversed, I think. I don't think that Ewing gets enough blame for the championship in 1994 because he was their best player. And if you look back, when you talk about the pantheon of like rankings for centers and people that deserve to be top 10 players, Hakeem Olajuwon dominated Patrick in that series. Patrick, had, I think, 4 games where he shot less than 40% from the field. And because of it, John Starks essentially became the team's number 1 option in that series. With that happening, he was fantastic for more than half the series. He had double-digit fourth quarters in games 4, 5, and 6, and nearly won the series for the Knicks in Game 6. On the last play of the game, he had a 3 that he took that would have won it for the Knicks had it gone down. Hakeem Olajuwon got maybe a fingernail, grazed the shot with the fingernail to change the trajectory of it. But the reason John was doing all that is because Patrick was really struggling to score against Hakeem Olajuwon and was not playing like a number 1 or even a number 2 option in that series. So I don't think he gets enough blame for that. Was Starks unfairly judged? No, because on the one hand, you don't have to shoot 18 for 18 for people to say he did his part in Game 7. He could have shot 6 for 18. He could have shot 8 for 18. He could have shot 4 for 18, and it would have been better than the 2 for 18 in a game that they lost by, I think, 7 points.
Right.
So, I think the judgment is fair there. What I think is interesting, I think Riley also has to take blame for that too, that he rolled with John Starks. Again, the context was that John Starks had been their only chance in late game situations. 3 double-digit fourth quarters in a row, I think 16 in the fourth quarter of Game 6. So he had been their best clutch option, their best scoring option. So Riley rolled with him. But as I write in the book, and hopefully not to give away too many spoilers, Pat Riley had a big argument with Rolando Blackman, who would have been one of the most logical substitutes for John Starks. He had a big argument with him in the series before, which Doc Rivers, Derek Harper, Charles Oakley, and Rolando himself have all remembered and have all wondered how much of a factor did that play in Pat Riley not using Rolando, who for his career, Rolando shot better percentage-wise, but also scoring-wise, average points per game. He had better games against the Rockets than any team in his career. He played for the Mavericks previously, and so he played against the Rockets a lot. And Scott Brooks, who played for the Rockets, and I interviewed for the book, even said we were petrified that he was going to bring Rolando Blackman in for Game 7 because we never had a way of stopping him. That he never did actually bring Rolando in. And so, Riley never did answer that question for me, but he has called it one of the biggest mistakes in his career, leaving Starks in and not putting Rolando in the game. And Rolando obviously retired after that game, which, was just kind of a question that we'll have for the ages of what would have happened. You don't have to take Starks out for the entire fourth, but maybe take him out for 2 minutes to give him a breather just to compose himself, because the reality was he had not slept for the 3 nights before that because he was still agonizing over the ending of Game 6, and he was kind of running that play in his head over and over again.
I think one of the most interesting things, and this is not, I haven't gotten all the way through the book, and this will tell you how I'm just kind of a sucker for like a good punchline here, and not a punchline, but this is shocking to me. And I think my generation and obviously younger generations, this is how we know the Knicks is the downfall, which you talk about. And it's just kind of the terrible team that we've seen the last 20 plus years. But since 2001, you say this, they've spent more money, lost more games, and won fewer playoff series than any other team in the NBA. And I think the most incredible part of that, the losing doesn't blow my mind. It's the fact that they've spent more money than any other team. Like, that is hard for me to wrap my mind around, because they're not a max player team, and at least haven't been in the last 5, 6, 7 years.
Tells you how much money they spent in the 5, 6, 7, and not the 5 or 6, 7, but the 13 or 14 years before that, from 2000 or so. And it's interesting because people have asked me the question several times. Do you just feel like Jim Dolan is to blame for all this? And if you get far enough into the book, I start connecting a lot of those dots to show exactly the sort of influence he has and where it's very, very heavy-handed, And again, that's me being down the middle. It's not me trying to sledgehammer the guy. But I mean, it's obvious that he's had certain influences. Among them is that he wanted to be involved. At least I think he's done a better job of not getting involved the last few years. But I think the bigger thing, to be fair to Jim Dolan, because there've been a few years where the Knicks have been better than people expected. Last season was a good example of that. And the year that I started covering the team in 2012 was a good example of that, where they won 54 games and finished second in the East. I don't think people are rushing to talk about Jim Dolan's influence when the team does well. So there are times where they can kind of surprise people. I think more realistically, the problem with the team, and maybe you can put some of this on Dolan as far as why the team has struggled in this regard, they had a legitimate superstar from 1985 to 2000, 2001 or so with Patrick Ewing. They haven't had that year in, year out since then. Yeah. Carmelo is maybe the closest thing they've had since then, at least in a healthy form. And Carmelo had flaws in his game that Patrick didn't necessarily have. And there was a better cast of players around Patrick as far as just the fit and the identity. There hasn't really been one It's something that changes year to year, day to day, with this organization. So I think that's a lot to blame for it. But when you look at one, they haven't had Patrick since, those early 2000 years. I think the other thing is that the way they traded Patrick kind of started a really, really unfortunate cycle for them, is that they traded him, and I mentioned this in the book, for a lot of pieces. Can't remember exactly who the guys were, but it was like Glenn Rice and a bunch of other guys that were, by that point in their career, were falling off, that had big, heavy contracts that you had to take in order to unload Patrick. Patrick, if they had just taken him for the last year of his Knicks tenure, on the last year of his contract, they would have owed him however much it was. And it was a big number. It was like 18 million or 19 million, which was a lot for those years. It was about like 2000, 2001, whenever it was. But instead of keeping him for that year and just paying him for that year, they traded him for guys that had money that ran multiple years into the future for to the tune of like $90 million. So it was like 18 million for that year, but they all had money that lasted for another 4 or 5 years. And they kept making trades like that promised so much money to guys and saddled the Knicks with so much long-term salary. And they kept doing that as a way to try to, to win now, but really also win later. But these were guys that were declining. And so they kept doing that. And I think they'd still, I won't say to this day, but up until a few years ago, we're still doing those sorts of things that were really short-sighted, that were, hopefully we can squeeze something out of this now, but not really thinking about it. It would be like saving your retirement money, or not saving your retirement. That. And it really came back to bite them. And Dolan a lot of times would override his general managers and his executives to make deals, not the Ewing one, but the Andrea Bargnani trade that happened while I was covering the team, where you're giving up Steve Novak, who's had the best 3-point percentage in the league for the last 2 years, for a guy that shot less than 30% from three and has been injury prone for the years leading up to that. And then what do you know? He can't shoot threes and he gets hurt during his Knicks tenure. Deals like that, and several other ones, and including the Carmelo one, where, he got involved and pulled the trigger and gave up more than the Knicks wanted to. The Knicks executives wanted to, because he really wanted the deal to get done. And again, that's Dolan's influence, is that he's always been a little bit more involved than he should be. He overrides people that he has put in charge. But I don't think, as much as I know all that, I don't think that it's always been his fault. I think that they have just not had another true superstar. I think they're hoping Carmelo would be that, and I think he was maybe a tier short of that. Or maybe he had that performance for 1 or 2 seasons. But there's a lot of problems with this team, or there have been at least. And I think it's helpful to look back at what the 90s were and how stable they were to get a sense of what the team often did right during this year.
Yeah.
And look, the coaching of Riley and Van Gundy after that, a major difference from some of the coaches that the Knicks have run through here in the 2000s as well. I'll ask you now, just because I'm on it, is Tibbs the guy? Is this the right job for Tom Thibodeau to, I'm not talking about win a championship, Chris, but to win a playoff series in New York?
I think that might be possible. I think it will require him having a better roster than what he had last year. I think that, look, if you are on the Twitter sphere at all and you follow enough fans, you know that a lot of younger fans and a lot of people that are on social media really wanted him out this year. I think that that's maybe a percentage of what fans think. I think there were expectations this past year in terms of the way he, would lead the team based on what we saw the season before, where they were unexpectedly very good. At the same time, he does have kind of a history and a track record of doing well to start, unexpectedly well, and then things kind of falling off a cliff a little bit when the way he coaches and the way he asks for so much of his players, it wears on guys. And in a very similar way to in the book, Pat Riley really wore on guys after the 3rd, 4th year, particularly after you have nothing to show for it. With those Knicks in the 90s, it was to not win a championship. With Riley, it was that way. I think with Thibodeau, it would be, like you said, if you can't win a playoff series, do your players start to tune you out when they don't have that success, when they don't win? So I think it'll be interesting to see whether they can get there. His track record would suggest that no, it's not right to assume that he would, have his best year yet with the team. He hasn't had that trajectory yet with the Bulls, with the Timberwolves, and now I guess we'll see with the Knicks. I do think this is kind of a make or break year for him, given that they'll be going into year 3, given that I think you could maybe get a mulligan with last year because Kemba Walker obviously was not someone that they could rely on physically to be out there. You can put that on the front office. Evan Fournier was not great for them in the early parts of the season. To some extent, you could put that on the front office, and they did not make trades during the deadline, and you could put that on the front office. So I would venture to guess that the front office is going to take more of a swing this year. And if they do that, I imagine that the blame is going to rest with Thibodeau if they don't get it done. So we'll find out really soon the answer to that question, whether he can be the guy. But it is interesting that he has ties to, those Riley years, those Van Gundy years, because he was an assistant under Jeff. And so they do have some of that blood running through the organization again. But, basketball has changed a lot in a lot of ways. Riley obviously has continued to have success, but it's been a long time for the Knicks.
Ash, let me jump in with one here and throw up the book there, if you would. Blood in the Garden is the book, and Chris Herring is the author, covers the NBA. You can see on your screen. Go follow him on Twitter as he covers the league, and go read the book. It is absolutely worth your time. Am I romanticizing 90s basketball? I'll say this, Chris, and then you can judge my intel on NBA. It's more entertaining now from a skill set standpoint. The guys now are so much more talented and skilled than they were in the 90s. But to me, watching the playoffs in the 90s was more enjoyable because there was more physicality to it. These guys didn't seem to like each other. They weren't hanging out the night before or in the off season working out together like that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't remember ever hearing about guys working out together in the off season from opposing teams. So am I right here? Was 90s basketball something that is worth me being the old guy on the block? Like, you guys don't have any idea.
It was different. It was certainly different. I mean, there's nothing wrong with admitting that. I think that's the truth. What I will say that's funny, I think that the last couple of weeks have maybe been as close to what I remember in the NBA recently, aside from the 90s. That Bucks-Celtics series was extremely, extremely physical. Not in a dirty way. At least most of the time I didn't feel like it was. But it did kind of remind me of that a little bit, where the refs were struggling to keep a hold on the game. They were struggling to figure out what's a foul, what's not. You'd see Giannis ram into Grant Williams' chest 2 and 3 times before he, looks for a shot. So that was certainly different, but that was a mild version of what the 90s were as far as the fights. I mean, and to what you're saying, and I do try to draw somewhat direct lines throughout the book in saying that as unrefined as the Knicks were in some ways during the 1990s, I think that they are maybe as responsible or to blame for the league kind of moving into this heavily, skill-based, athleticism-based league. The NBA was very protective of Michael Jordan, and they will tell you that, it wasn't to be protective of Michael specifically, and they will tell you that they weren't trying to protect Michael from the Knicks specifically, but that they did start implementing several rule changes that were very clearly put in place because of the Knicks. The Knicks, for instance, in 1993, had way more flagrant fouls than any other team in the league. Hell, Charles Oakley had more flagrant fouls by himself than 15 teams did in 1993. He had more than twice as many flagrant fouls as any other player in 1993. So the league very quickly after that season was looking to alter those rules. They were starting to make it so that flagrant fouls were going to be penalized differently. You could only have so many of them before the league would suspend you. That was part of it. The hand checking, getting rid of it was part of it to try to increase the scoring. Derek Harper, the Knicks starting point guard for a few years, was the poster child of that, so much so that when the league started outlawing that and showing players what would no longer be allowed, and they went from team to team during training camp to show that they'd no longer allow it, Derek Harper was kind of the star of the video where, if you've ever seen that meme with Garfield where they say like, no hungry cats that are going to eat all my food allowed. They have the picture of Garfield kind of in that no smoking sign with the little sign through it. Derek Harper was essentially that guy where Derek Harper thought it was funny to watch the video, but he's like, wait a minute, you guys are really scapegoating me here and saying I'm the reason that hand checking has gotten out of line. But so they got rid of that. They moved the 3-point line in, which it would seem like it would condense the game more to do that defensively, but actually it does the opposite because guys that normally hang out at the rim and hang out at the basket defensively and don't guard anybody because they're trying to grab a rebound or trying to stop guys from driving into the paint. Now those guys have to come out to the 3-point line to guard a little bit more because otherwise you're giving guys what, at a certain point would have become a wide open free throw. If they move the line in too far and you're not guarding them. So guys had to be more cognizant of opponents shooting threes because they're going to move the line in closer, the arc in closer. So all these things were spacing the game out more. We're making it more based on skill. And the league's response to me asking why that would happen and why they would do that was basically that we started to worry that physicality was going to become more important than skill. And we didn't want to give teams an incentive to build their teams that way. We wanted athleticism and we wanted skill and talent to be more important. And we didn't want that, physicality to be an equalizer to where you don't have to build your roster in a way that has skill on it. So the Knicks were, they were the team that was aimed at. They claim they weren't. They say that, the Knicks were the closest the league came to acknowledging that the Knicks were the reason for all that. They said, okay, the Knicks weren't the reason, but I can understand you asking the question the way you do because they probably were the team that was most physical and that teams were emulating. And so in some ways, we were trying to stop other teams from becoming the way the Knicks were becoming. And it did change things where, if you don't have shooting on your team, it was going to hinder you in a way after, the Knicks were physical for another couple of years. And then after a while, they changed the roster and had Latrell Sprewell and Marcus Camby and guys that were not thought of as that physical, and they lost Charles Oakley and lost John Starks. They had lost Anthony Mason by that point to trade him for Larry Johnson. So it was more of a team based on skill and athleticism and talent than it was physicality by the time you got to about 97, 98 or so. And now in Houston, obviously, was another guy too.
Right.
It's funny, Chris, when you asked that question, I immediately thought the Celtics feel like the most 90s NBA team we've seen in a while. And it's because they play defense. Like they're the top rated defense in the league and they have skill still, which is hard to do, to make that combination of skill and physicality. They've got the size, but then they've got the superstars who are certainly skillful as well. So I think, listen, they've shown that the formula can work. So maybe we see a little bit of a swing back. We always see more defense in the playoffs. That's kind of how it goes, but interesting. For sure. I mean, the thing they've got going for them, although it did not really shine through in game one. Yeah. They've got two guys that are, all-star caliber guys. Jason Tatum, finished on the MVP ballot this year. Yeah. So they've got more, I think they have a little bit more talent than those Knicks teams did. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. You watch them and you watch the fact that all these guys are diving on the floor and Marcus Smart being a defensive player of the year. And, it's certainly interesting. When you look at them and the way they defend and how that is a calling card for them generally. It is tough now that they're playing a team like Miami that does a lot of the same things. Yeah. But that was the Knicks' reality whenever they played against a team like Indiana or whenever they played against the Miami Heat. Once Pat Riley got there, is that you were playing a team that was your mirror image. Yeah. But Boston certainly has a lot of those qualities for sure.
Chris, I'll let you get out of here on this as we remind people the book is out and available now, Blood in the Garden. The irony of all of this, as much as I love the 90s NBA, Ashley will tell you my favorite player to watch currently is Steph Curry, a guy who I'm not going to besmirch the name, but let's just say physicality and defense is not at number one on his list of priorities when he starts an NBA basketball game. Okay, but I'll let you get out of here on this. What happens first in the NBA, do you think? They move the 3-point line back or we get a 4-point shot?
If I had to guess, what I would say is that we get a 4-point shot first. Because I kind of feel like the league, and they haven't gone this way as far as the rules are concerned that I can remember, but they look for small things. Gimmick is a little strong, but it's also probably accurate. As far as even earlier this week, you're seeing reports of them throwing in a mid-season tournament,
right?
Within the next year or two, which we already have the play-in now, which I think the play-in tournament has been successful, where it's been entertaining to watch. Maybe sometimes it's a little frustrating for teams that are 4 or 5 games better than the teams behind them in 9th or 10th place, where they don't feel like they should have to play their way in. But it's been entertaining. We watched the Grizzlies play their way in last year and get some experience last year in the playoffs, and then we watched them win around this year and to some extent push Golden State even without John Morant. So the reason I say that, if they done that and now they're looking at a mid-season tournament to try to hold interest or to draw ratings or whatever it is that they're looking to do, and they're always on the prowl for something else seemingly, a 4-point play seems like maybe the thing that they would look to, because that's more gimmicky than just moving the line back. I don't think you're going to get more viewers by saying we're going to move the line back. It would just make people that have complained about the proliferation of 3-pointers more happy, but I don't think it's going to bring people that stop watching the game because of 3-pointers back. You might get new viewers or have more to talk about if you're making 4-pointers a thing. You'd have more games that in the final possession, all of a sudden you have to guard against 4 points instead of 3. So if a team is down by 4, that's still a 1-possession game. It keeps your interest longer. You can think about it this way. We've had more 20-point and 30-point comebacks in the last couple of years than we ever have, because again, the 3-pointer is such a big thing. The momentum swings are faster. If you had a 4-pointer, I mean, that would be even more true in some ways, that if guys get accurate at that, and they probably would because they've gotten really accurate from 3 all of a sudden, it would just make the leads even more fallible in some ways, where teams could slip and other teams could kind of come back very quickly. So I think that would be more, and I'd be a little bit surprised if they did that in the next couple of years. But then again, the league is always looking for ways to try to draw more eyeballs. I think even now, as their ratings are increasing this season, we've seen that, I think the NFL is going to play games on Christmas this year, which they normally don't. So that's going to kind of start to encroach on the NBA's territory a little bit. So it wouldn't be wildly surprising to me if they start to look for things to tweak and gimmicky sort of stuff to utilize.
Sam's watching. He hates the idea of a 4-point shot or changing
Me too,
the
Sam.
game at all.
Yeah,
I'm all in, and I could do this all day, Chris. As you know, practice facilities are marked now with weird spots on the floor where guys can take shots that are worth more than 3, if you will. So people, go get this book, Blood in the Garden. If you are an NBA fan the way I am, if you remember the 90s the way I do, it is so worth the read. Chris, we appreciate you taking the time, man, and so really enjoy your coverage of the league as well. We've chatted on radio before, but I appreciate you doing the visual thing here with us in Albany, New York. Thank you so much for having me. It's really good to see you both, and you guys take care.
Thanks, you too, Chris.
Chris Herring, we kept him over time, but again, as I'm telling you, I could talk all day about this stuff.
You love it.
I hope people go check out the book.
Yeah.
It is worth reading for sure. All right, when we come back here on Onorato and Company, we teased baseball. Let's get to the baseball here. Aaron Judge is betting on himself that he can get a bigger contract than what the Yankees have offered. Let's just say this guy is red hot at the craps table right now. We're back right after this.
At Marcella's Appliance Center, our commitment is to you, providing essential appliances that families depend on for cooking, refrigeration, cleaning, and sanitation, plus appliance repair. You can have peace of mind that Marcella's is here for you today and every day, like we have been since 1957, helping you make the right choice with trusted brands like Whirlpool, Maytag, KitchenAid, Genair, and many more. Shop Marcella's Appliance Center in-store, online, or by phone. We're here for you.
It's time for bright stars, blue skies, and total freedom. Don't miss the camping season kickoff at Alpenhaus RV. Shop our biggest selection in years and buy a new 22-foot Avenger travel trailer for $194 a month, or a new 33-foot Avenger travel trailer for just $245 a month. Plus, all 2020 and newer RVs come with our exclusive lifetime warranty. Act now and you can camp all year for free with your new RV during the camping season kickoff, only at Alpenhaus RV.
And now back to Onorato and Company, brought to you by Alpenhaus.
Alpenhaus and Novice and Performance Industrial and Popeyes and Pick Six Vodka and KPM Restoration and Marcella's. Our people at Marcella's, we are loaded up with support and
yes,
could not
we
be
are
more thankful for our local business partners here on Onorato and Company. Let's do some of these here, Ash.
Comments?
Sam, good morning. We see you, buddy. The J-Man watching as well. And Carol, I have something sitting at my desk, I'm told at work, that I need to open from you. So thank you already in advance. Because
speaking of things,
hope you had a great birthday. Yeah, go ahead. I have it in my left hand.
Do it. Go right ahead. I used mine last night to have some cookies and milk when I got home at midnight. Sam.
Our thanks to Sam for hooking us up with the Masters Cups.
Thank you, Sam.
PGA Championship week, but we're remembering back to the Masters, so we appreciate Sam all that you've done for us. Nick is watching Who Day. Always a little Who Day from Nick and the great people at Marcella's. So we appreciate that. That was a fun conversation with Chris Herring. Awesome. I hope you all enjoyed that as well. Ash, you've been watching a ton of the Yankees. It's a lot more fun, obviously, when your team is winning, and man, are they winning. Here we are on a Thursday. They've won 21 of 24 games. Insane. Giancarlo Stanton is hot at the plate, but nobody is doing it quite like Aaron Judge this season. He said no thanks to a contract from the Yankees that was roughly 7 years and worth $30 million a year. Is he playing himself into, I get it, he's betting on himself, he's playing very well.
Yep.
Is he playing himself into a bigger contract, though?
I mean, currently, yes. But we know how this has gone.
But here's my question. If he sustains, I'm not talking about him hitting 74 home runs and breaking the record or hitting 60, but let's say he hits 48 and he's around 300 and he's got 130 RBIs. Is he worth more than $30 million a year? Is he going to get more than 7 years? That I guess is my question here. Is
my guess is he will get more than 7 years from someone. I don't know how much more than 30
years
million
old
you're going to give. I'm good. As a Yankee fan, I am good with the offer that they gave Aaron Judge. It wasn't that anyone thought he was a bad player. It wasn't that anyone thought he wasn't going to live up to a 7-year, $210 million contract. It was that there are more players on your team. At some point, the Yankees are trying to be somewhat financially responsible with all this money tied up in Garrett Cole, all this money tied up in Giancarlo Stanton. Now all this money tied up in Aaron Judge, potentially. Who else is playing for you? Like, I get it. He's one of the best players on the planet. But you can't win a World Series with just those three guys. So I think he'll play into a bigger, maybe more lucrative contract. But I don't know if it's going to be with the Yankees, because I think at some point the Yankees are going to say, okay, we'll give you 31. We'll give you 32. But he's not, I don't think he's going to get 35 a year from the New York Yankees. And I just don't know that any one person is worth that. Like, I know if you take him off this team, it's a vastly different team. I just don't know if he's worth that.
I'm with you that I don't know. I don't think he gets more than 7. I don't think anybody wants to pay him until he's 40.
Yeah, I don't.
He's 30 now. So 7 and 8 is, I think, as high as any team would go. Here's what I think becomes interesting is the teams that have, I'm just checking on Max Scherzer news here just in case something is happening on this Thursday. I think what you'll see is teams offer him $42 million a year for 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
Yes. And Aaron Judge has to make the decision.
Right. Do you want the
Do I
money or do you
want
want
the
length?
long-term security,
Mhm.
or do I want to? Because think about this. If he signs a 3-year deal and he's going to get 40+ million a year, which I think is very realistic, I hit free agency again.
Yep.
The TV contracts are bigger and better. The DH is in both leagues. My options now when I hit my late 30s are doubled. So I go to free agency at 33 or 34. Can I get another 4 years now still in that $40 million range because teams are making more money? They have more to spend. I wouldn't. I get that he's betting on himself short term right now, and it's working. And it would lead somebody to believe, hey, I've done it before, I can do it again. But we know what happens to the body in the 30s. I would say take as many years as you can get now to guarantee yourself being paid $30+ million when you're 37 or 38 years old. That would be me.
You're talking 210 versus say he gets 3 years, 40, that's 120. I mean, both are plenty to live off of. You're all set. You're fine. If you get hurt, you break a leg, you never come back. You're A-okay for the rest of your life. But we've seen what injuries can do to him. When he's bothered by an injury, it can be a long, extended period of time. Whether or not that's because of his build, the number of pounds, the muscle on his body, his height, like all of those play a factor. And does he deteriorate faster than a guy like DJ LeMahieu, who's, you know what I mean? Like, who maybe doesn't put as much wear and tear on his body, who's not built quite the same way? Yeah, probably. So those are all things that have to come into play. I would prefer the Yankees give him 3 years, 40 than 7 years, 30. Because being tied into those contracts, I can deal with if he has one bad year out of 3. Okay, I can deal with the 40. But I can't deal with he tails off after 4 years and now you're paying him 30 a year for the final 3 years of his contract.
It also just the length of a contract that's 7 or 8 years long. As a Braves fan, I'm looking at Matt Olson, 8 years, and I'm seeing what he's doing through a month and a half, and you're like, what are we going to get from now? But that's the immediacy that we have as a fan. Like, what are we getting from this guy over the next 7.5 years? Look what he's done in the first month and a half. The Braves overall have been bad, but it does concern you when you, no matter the guy's track record, and Judge's track record is better than Olson's. When you give somebody a deal like that, it would scare you off a little bit. It would scare me
Long-term
off
commitment is scary.
sure. Oh, is it ever? Woo, boy. Chris Onorato and Ashley Miller here on Onorato and Company. Our Twitter handles there. We hope you give Chris Herring a follow as well at Herring_NBA to check out his coverage and his book called Blood in the Garden. If you joined us midway through, beautiful thing about social media, go back and watch it, or wait till Saturday night at 6:30 on my 4, and you can check it out there as well. All right, when we come back here on Onorato and Company, Ash, we've got the Popeyes Louisiana Fast Minute still to come, and
Max Scherzer.
Well, I didn't want to go too deep into it here because what if he ends up being healthy and but here we go. Yeah, Scherzer he left Wednesday's game in the 6th inning with side tightness. He said he doesn't think it's a major deal. He doesn't think it was a big time strain, but as you wait for Jacob deGrom to get healthy, and now Max Scherzer at 37 years old is maybe showing some wear and tear early in the season. Remember, he had the tired arm and couldn't pitch last postseason.
Hamstring to start the season.
There are some concerns here. Yes,
this is what every Mets fan was worried about: the ability to sustain the length of the season. We talked about the Mets being a really good team, top to bottom. They're doing it without Jacob deGrom. Well, I'll tell you what, they can't do it without Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer. So they got to hope that it's not a long-term injury. And oh, by the way, Tyler McGill is on the IL as well. So this is where things can start to go south. And this is why you talk about a team, what's more sustainable for the life of, it's always, the caveat is always injuries, because I'm not saying I want it to happen. The Mets season could literally change on a dime.
Yes. No question. That one pitch to Albert Pujols. Yeah, we may be
Things down
talking
the
about
time.
that still in September. Like, hey, remember when Scherzer missed
Yep.
2 months? I don't know. Here's a contract that didn't work out. Chris
Oh,
Davis in
boy.
Baltimore.
Did it ever not? Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a really bad one.
Different guys, obviously. Different guys. Davis had the one good year.
Okay.
All right, let's take a quick time out here. We come back. Popeyes Louisiana Fast Minute. We've got the Preakness this week as well. Our Pick 6 vodka picks. No, neither one of us had Rich Strike to win you some money last time at the Derby, but he's
I
not
didn't even know who that horse was.
Yeah, exactly. Well, neither did he. Didn't know he was running till Friday.
Yeah,
so
I know.
He is not at Pimlico. We'll tell you about some of the horses that are there and what horses we think have the best chance to win. Back in only 30 seconds. Hang on, everyone.
Teams, athletes, organizations. We're transforming the custom apparel industry through product and purpose. Claim your crown.
And now back to Onorato and Company. Brought to you by Alpenhaus.
Quick shout out to our guys at Novice Clothing Company, noviceclothingcompany.com. Check them out. They've got some really cool things happening this summer, like their cat volleyball tournament as they relocate to a bigger building along Wolf Road in Colony. The cat volleyball tournament is July 14th. And they've got a traveling golf league that they are spearheading with our guy Bill Miller from Performance Industrial, another partner of ours here, to benefit the American Cancer Society. So 2 really cool things that our guys over at Novice are part of, noviceclothingcompany.com. Again,
Guess who
or
I saw
on
Wednesday
Instagram.
night?
I don't know.
Mr. Bernardo.
Really?
Nick Bernardo. And
Why?
as well as Mr. and Mrs. Bernardo, his parents.
Oh.
Yeah, we were at the Bethlehem Columbia baseball game, and Cade was playing a little baseball, and turned out to be his last game of his high school career. So all the Bernardos were there.
Okay.
Bernardo
Very cool.
crew.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Always good to see those guys.
Yeah, always good to see those guys. Here is your field for the Preakness Stakes. The Preakness Ash, hang on a second. Let me just say this on camera.
Okay.
I would not want to be a sporting event like the Preakness Stakes.
It's the middle child.
That's it. And I'm one of 2. You are one of 2.
Yep.
We don't really understand the middle child syndrome that appears to be very real. But horses don't want to run in the Preakness unless they've won the Derby, or unless they narrowly lost the Derby, or just do better in a shorter field. Like the Preakness is the forgotten of the Triple Crown race. I hate saying that because our guy Chad Brown has a Preakness victory, which is his 1 Triple Crown victory on his record right now. But
there's a reason.
People pass by the I don't want to go to the Preakness.
That there's a reason for it, is because if you don't win the Derby, you're not going to run back on short rest. That's just not how the sport works. And it would be short rest. So you're automatically set up. Unless you have a Derby winner who's going to run in the Preakness, the interest fails, because anyone who's running the Derby, unless you're Epicenter, is not running in the Preakness. But him and Simplification, I think, are the only 2. And that's 2 of 20 that are running in this race.
Carol, my God, we love you. She says, I'm a middle child. It sucks. I bet it does. Nobody wants that. All right, here we go. The Preakness Stakes, Ash, this weekend. Your field of 9 horses. Yep. Will 9 go off on Saturday? Don't know. Epicenter is the favorite, though. Yep. Certainly looked like he was going to win the Kentucky Derby up until he didn't at 6-5. Mm-hmm. Secret Oath, 9-2. That exactly the Kentucky Oaks winner. You get the filly in this race, which I think makes it at least maybe a little more interesting here. And early voting, which is a Chad Brown horse with Jose Ortiz aboard at 7-2. Yep. So look, there's enough interest in it for us.
Yep.
Here are our picks. I'm on early voting. Let's go. Fresh, I'm going based on fresh legs here. Didn't run in the Derby. Chad says he's been pointing towards the Preakness with this horse all along.
All right.
Love it. He's confident. Love it. Let's do it. Epicenter finishes second again. And then Simplification. So another Derby horse. 2 of the 3 ran in the Derby in my trifecta.
So we went, well, first of all, I created a new horse name, Epicentera.
Ooh, I didn't
added
check
some
that
flavor
one.
to it. I went pretty, I guess technically we both went pretty heavy favorites. Simplification, I think, was only 6-1. I went very heavy favorites. I've got the chick, we'll call her, the filly, to hit the board in third, Secret Oath. I love the story when a filly runs against the boys for obvious reasons. Early voting Chad in second, which I think I also picked him second in the Derby. That didn't work out for me or him. And then Epicenter for the win. So I went favorite. I know we say favorite works out more often probably than it doesn't, but it didn't work out. Yeah, exactly. The 50-1.
But here, honestly, this is my thought process on picking that trifecta specifically. Short field, wide open track. Not a lot of traffic to have to work through.
Sure.
You don't wait as long for every horse to load into the gate. To me, this type of field, the best horses win and hit the board. So maybe I'm making a point here that Epicenter should win, maybe, but I think it's going to be either Epicenter or early voting. I'm going to be surprised if it isn't one of those two, to be completely honest with you. I think it's going to be a wide open track. Let these guys and gals have at it.
I would have said I was going to be surprised if there was an 80-1 that hit in the Derby too, but that happened.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, let's jump into the Popeyes Louisiana Fast Minute here.
I just teed you up.
You did. That's true.
I teed you right on up.
Yeah. Yep. If I were any good at this, I would have just rolled the open and said, have at it, Ash.
All right. I know Chris did this last week. What my message here is for all you horse racing fans out there that feel like Rich Strike and his connections owe you something, to shut up. This horse doesn't owe you anything. 80-1 shocks the world, comes in first in the Kentucky Derby. Now they're not going to run him. And all you people out there are complaining because you don't get to see a potential Triple Crown. Listen, I don't think anyone thinks the guy has a chance to win the Preakness. That being said, nobody thought he had a chance to win the Derby. But they're making the right decision. Finally, horse racing is making the right decision for a horse for the betterment of the animal. They don't want to run him back on short rest. That wasn't the plan. They want to give him 5 weeks. Hooray, they're going to give him 5 weeks. Let's just be happy for the horse. He can go run again some other time. If he never wins again in his life, it won't matter. He's a Kentucky Derby champ. But I like that they're doing what they feel is right for the horse and not thinking about them and their money.
I'll be honest with you. You're pretty good at this. I mean, right on the 1 minute mark.
I don't know if that was on purpose.
I can never hit the minute mark. I will try it here in a second. Popeyes Louisiana Fast Minute is something we do each and every week here on Onorato and Company. Shout out to Heidi Cousino, Kevin Parisi, people who made this happen, this partnership on our show as the Popeyes pop up in the capital region. There we're already a couple smattering. There are more, and there are going to be more grand openings throughout this year. So look out for them. The newest one in the Del Mar area. I always get fuzzy on do I call Del that Mar, Albany? Yeah, I know. I call it Del Mar.
Clifton Park is still fresh and young.
And then one up in Clifton Park as well with more to come. All right, here I go. On the Popeyes Louisiana Fast Minute clock. Nick Saban says Texas A&M bought their top-ranked recruiting class. He says that because NIL is now a thing, right? As a coach, and Saban said it, I've got an allotment of money that I know I can kind of guarantee to players. It's a collective that I can guarantee to player. That's beyond even the car dealership deals that a player may strike with somebody. The way Bryce Young, I think, made more than $1 million this season as the quarterback of Alabama. Saban's not wrong, but I don't want to hear it
because
this has gone on. And I'm not saying Saban's been doing dirty things with boosters, but this has been going on forever. You essentially buy players as you recruit them with shiny new things like workout facilities, locker rooms that are state of the art, and a winning program. This is not new. It's a different tactic. But the idea that you recruit by throwing things at players, even though back in the day it may not have just been straight cash, there's always been money spent, Ash, to try to lure better players to a college football or basketball program. We're just doing it in a different way now. Saban shouldn't have beef with this.
You said it. I don't want to hear it. This is nothing new. This sounds like sour grapes to me. Someone else got the top recruiting class in the country, so you're going to whine and call cheat. I don't want to hear it. You've had the top recruiting class in the country how many years out of the last 10? 7, 8, 9 maybe? Texas A&M has the top recruiting class, so you're going to call him out and say that they bought their top-ranked recruiting class. They bought every player on their team because they made an NIL deal. Guess what? This is the new arms race, is the NIL. And until the NCAA decides that there is a way that they can patrol it, that they can make rules for it, people are going to recruit using the NIL. Isaiah Wong said he was going to transfer out of Miami because there weren't enough NIL opportunities for him to make money. Guess what? That's a recruiting tool. Collectives are literally sums of 10, 20, $30 million that go to football players as a salary. That's not NIL. That you are paying someone's salary. I just don't want to hear it. The NCAA is so dirty. All of the idea of a collective is dirty. We're back worse than we were before NIL was created.
I hate to relate athletics at a high level to the real world. I really try to avoid it at every possible moment because it isn't the real world. But raise your hand if you wouldn't leave your current job for a significant amount of money somewhere else. Now, everybody keep your hand down because you would. I'm talking significant money. I'm talking life-changing money. I'm not talking about, look, that's defined differently to everybody. I'm not talking about a sum of money that you don't notice at the end of the day because I'd rather stay around family or I like the security of my job. We would all take another job for a significant amount of money, period. We would do it in our 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. So if you don't think somebody at 19 is going to do it, you're out of your mind. Yeah. And I don't blame them. The opportunity to cash in for a lot of these athletes is so short. Even if they become a pro, you get maybe 10 years. So if I can start making money at 18 when I'm a college freshman, you better believe I'm doing it.
Yeah, Chris, the other thing I didn't love, he came out and said, Alabama players made $3 million last year, quote, doing it the right way. And this is another thing. Only 25 of his players were able to leverage NIL opportunities.
Yeah.
What are you doing wrong? Your entire team, from the kicker to the placeholder to the assistant to the graduate assistant, every single person on that team can get NIL opportunities in the state of Alabama without thinking twice. Pizza, soda, the car wash. There is not a player on that team that can't get an NIL opportunity because he plays for the Crimson Tide. So bad on them for not being able to make it happen because it seems impossible. Impossible.
I don't know. Do you like it better that he's complaining about A&M now before he's really lost to A&M?
I don't like that he complains about anything.
Or is it worse if he were to complain about A&M after he's lost to A&M or after the Aggies won a national? I don't know. Thanks for watching Onorato and Company, everybody. Have a great week.